Welcome back, Visions fans. Finally doing the Resnick character review released last week. Wanted a little extra time to think about things because we've seen so many changes to Lightning as of late that I wanted to have a coherent argument for the thoughts that I have about her. So jumping into things, the review breakdown will be a character overview and then a report card and base stat analysis as well. My general thoughts kind of encapsulating the whole presentation, the class and job overview, and then I'm going to do a slight segue to looking at TP in particular as a metric and why she might need a little help with it. And then we're going to go through the notable vision cards as per weapons with some Truststone recommendations at the end as well. Now, getting to the character overview, brand new Lightning unit. The thing that's kind of different about her is she is a permanent pool character, which we don't get many of them quite often anymore, and her jobs are all ones that are well established in the game, so there's not a lot of theory crafting to do outside of just what are the combinations of how they work together. So we have the Devout, the Arithmetician, and the Thief subjob. The Thief one is really just there for certain passives, some extra stats for her, really not something you can use prevalently. We'll talk about that more later. She can equip rods, or otherwise known as staffs, and equip hat, cloths, and accessories with a move of 3 and a jump of 1. Overall, the rest of the resistances, she does have some highs and lows, and more lows than highs. So, most egregiously, the minus 15% to Pierce, while also being minus 10% to Strike, and minus 5% to Magic. While you might first look at this and go, wow, she's very fragile, that actually ends up not being the case in practice, but we'll talk more about that soon. She is strong to Slash, 15%, and Missile, 5%. To me, that's really just to make sure that she gets countered by the proper Earth units, if you will, that the Pierce side of things in particular with Oberyn and Noctis, they're just going to blow her out of the water. Totally fine. In terms of resistance to status elements, she will be a 97 faith unit, and so the ones she does have, Poison and Confusion, are okay. Certainly not ones that are game changers by any stretch of the imagination, but 10% to Berserk, definitely a little more niche, where it's really reserved for the fire element that you see that status resistance the most, and fire is just not that prevalent. So overall, not the greatest thing for resistance status elements, but that's fine. That's not going to alter her character terribly. Now, we talk about base stats, and one of the most important things to emphasize here nowadays is with the addition of the second vision cards, the Truststone passives, there's a lot more things that scale off of these base stats, and although they don't tell the whole story, it's good to know relatively which characters are strong in their base stats so that you know when you apply a certain percentage boost to them, they're going to get relatively good value or not so great value. Now, for an HP perspective, out of all the URs, and I believe this list goes as high as, I think, 109, she's sitting at 2793, definitely below the average UR health pool of 2985. That being said, that's really not that bad considering she is a support. If you do look at a lot of the other characters around here, sure, there are a couple supports that stick out, like Eldyra and Skahal to some degree, but you're also seeing a fair amount of other characters like Luel, Clouds down here, Elserel, so her health pool for support isn't in the worst starting spot from a base HP perspective. Looking very briefly at TP, which is not one that often gets brought up in the game, she actually is a little bit below her support counterparts, where the average is 144, and that she's way above that. That's, not a surprise, but when you do look at the top, let's say 6 to 10, your main supports in the game, they are well into the 200 range, if not the high 180s, so she is lagging a little bit behind in that regard. So that's important to note that you may want to make up for that when we go through the class job overview section, which is, in my opinion, the most important part of this presentation as opposed to some of the others. We'll see more why that's important. Then we get into the magic. I have the average here sorted for the top half of the list, just to exclude the attack users by and large. The average is a 301, she's at 367, really not a bad spot. Comparable to Ibarra here. So for those of you that have experienced giving Ibarra Truststone sets and vision cards, the amount at which the magic increases will be relatively the same here for Resnick. When we get into the agility, she is actually relatively speedy in practical terms. So 59 base agility compared to the UR average of 56. She also does have a passive that can amplify that agility, so it ends up being a little faster than you may normally expect. From a luck and dexterity perspective, though, definitely averages here, where you can see the average is 198, she's at 191, and 168, she's at 163. Neither of these stats are strong points of hers, and are actually some significant weaknesses to her statistically. We'll talk about that in the report card right now. Now, this support report card, but honestly, I do not put much weight into this report card, and that was kind of exposed last time in my Velas analysis, where a lot of these metrics are more impactful when you talk about DPS and tanks to some extent, where their HP and their primary stats and how their turn order goes really is an intricate part of how they operate, but as support, really not so much. At the end of the day, it's really just a question of do they support in the things that they're supposed to. That's really it. I'm still going to go through this, but I don't have a lot of weight behind these grades. So effective HP, I'm giving her a B plus right across the board here. As we saw, she does have some, severe weaknesses to some physical attack types, but she does have some good defense stats that she does have some innate defense and a passive that can certainly boost it up as well. Overall, the effective HP, she's got some AoE resistance as well. It ends up being above average for definitely what you might consider to be a weaker class of characters in the supports. For the primary stat, I'm giving her an A. She does end up getting to be a decently high magic stat in the broad scheme of the index overall. Agility, I'm giving her a B, and I could probably go just a smidge higher on this because she does have the passive that amplifies it by 12%. You won't always have that one on, but often enough that she does end up being relatively fast overall. Accuracy, she is an F. Definitely not an accurate character at all. It's amongst some of the worst, like top 10 worst in the game. As we saw, the dexterity and luck stats aren't very high, and the board stats and the passives don't do anything to supplement that, and nothing in her kit to really boost it either. So she is not accurate whatsoever. And we'll talk about more why that's not as impactful as you might normally think. Now, evasion, she's a D. Doesn't evade crap. Don't even attempt to do it. Movement, I'm giving her a B because she does have the Shikuchi passive, so she can get move one, jump one as well, so that does help the mobility. From a passive perspective, I'm giving her an A. She actually does have really good passives that will make her character good in a variety of different situations. Counter kit, I'm giving her a B+, just because there's one ability in particular that I really like on supports. We'll talk about that soon. The overall kit, I'm giving a B+. I really do like the devout job a lot in general. And the final grade, I'm giving a B+. She is a good support. Now, obviously tailor-made for lightning units. She does not apply to rainbow comps like Velas does by any means, but neither do most supports. You could say the same for Leela or Eldyra. That doesn't change the fact that they're still really good supports, and so isn't Resnick. At the end of the day, I'm not putting as much emphasis on this report card as I might normally do in terms of the letter grades. Overall, though, I do think the final grade of B+ is appropriate. Now, for my general thoughts, fantastic support unit for Lightning. Let's just call it what it is. She is. She does a valuable kit to pocket some specific units and really amplify what they do well and help them survive. She does have good versatility to heal between the Devout job and the Arithmetician subjob, where they both have varying ranges, cast times, potencies, things of that nature. So being able to have access to both is a really good thing. The Thief subjob, as mentioned, really is there for PvE and to round out her stats and passives. Now, she does have some sneaky valuable healing power at 40. Now, one through her mastery and one through a buff that she can apply on herself. And I like this a lot because that's one of the downsides of your pure arithmeticians when you look at Eldyra and Leela, is that if the map doesn't cater to the certain heights that they need to get the maximum modifiers, the healing isn't as impactful in this stage of the game where health pools get as large as they do. Resnick, fortunately, doesn't tend to have that problem where she does have an advantage on the healing power up. Now, she does struggle with TP maintenance. As we go through the main job, you're going to see a majority of her abilities are TP related, and they're not cheap by any means. So I have heard instances where she will run out of TP. Maybe not always by the first battle, but by the second battle. It's a problem that has happened where we are in a meta where there's a lot of healing, a lot of sustain, a lot of high health pools that they go on longer than your average battle used to be. And to me, she does have above average support survivability. Now, she has a buff that does reduce her hate -6, so that's one way that she can survive a little bit longer. She does have a passive that also gives 15 AoE resistance and 15 defense and spirit, which obviously most supports don't have access to. So overall, she does have an above average amount of survivability from that regard. Now, when it comes to the aim and the accuracy, to me, it's really all or nothing. She's that bad. You can't just do one little thing here and hope that it makes the averages work. It's not. That being said, on to this next point, she's very much a cog to potentially counter the water meta. Now, that may not happen right now. That may be more when Lightning decides to end up coming out, but Resnick certainly is a piece of that, where when you do see that comp of Astrius, Celeste, and Velas, it becomes a matchup of sustainability, and Resnick is a big piece of replenishing the health pools of Lightning units so that they do at least have a more competitive balance than what you might have seen previously. And so to that point, I really am not worried about the aim because she's really not meant to counter high evasion teams. Quite frankly, that's what Cloud and Fred and with the right gear, Esther can do as well, that they're really meant with the variety of guaranteed hit and accuracy to take out that evasion, whereas Resnick's really just more there to support them in doing so. Now, the passive abilities. Metaphysical intuition is a must, in my opinion. That there's just too many good things on here, and the decrease of magic attack isn't terribly impactful because her AI is not an offensive one overall. The other one I like here is Thief Lore, where it does increase the move. But Thief Lore here, the other ones are obviously situational to the maps, where height 3 to height 2, level 4 to level 3 really are there depending upon what you're seeing for maps and how you want her to attack. But time and place, but not always, in my opinion. Now for the counter abilities, Counter Cure, I am a big fan of that. It does have a 20% chance to heal herself when receiving damage, and the reason why I like that is that it will hopefully affect her AI, that if she's not taking a lot of damage, then she will not have to move in range to heal herself with her teammates, which could potentially put her in the way of a lot of extra damage unnecessarily. That being said, I also do like quick action here, the increase of agility for the one turn of 40%, where getting her multiple turns does obviously give her more potential to throw out a couple attacks here and there, and then also obviously does have the upside of being able to heal quicker if need be. So quick action is also a fairly decent ability. Now the main job, the Devout, we're going to go through the abilities here. You can see most of these are TP oriented and support oriented. She only has one offensive ability here on the main kit, and the Dream Inducer. So we'll start there. It is a reflectable and absorbable ability with a cast time associated with it. It does have a really good modifier of 220% with a chance to inflict sleep. Now, not the most powerful status effect, but it is one that can affect turn order and rotation, where someone's turn comes up and they're asleep, you can disrupt it. So there's some element of RNG associated with it, but overall not the worst in the world. The rest of them here, so Cure, obviously great single target heals on cast time. Teachings of the Strongbolt is an immensely a great ability here for 30 TP. It increases lightning attack, debuff resistance to 30, which is very important that as we see lots of forms of defense break in the game currently, this makes it so there's a 30% chance that it doesn't take into effect as a debuff. The single target resistance is great for survivability, and then the reduction of the skill time on both attack and non-attack is important because there are a lot of abilities here that have cast time associated with them. Teachings of Self-Preservation is a really good one, just from the on paper that the defensive spirit is valuable and the healing power also is. I have noticed though that this is one that when not properly coordinated with movement, she does spam a little too often, or at least Minwoo did. I know that's part of the Devout AI, so I'm assuming it applies here as well. But overall, still strong ability. Law of Invigoration is a fantastic ability in that it is an insta-heal, definitely for a great potency, while also increasing agility, attack, and magic. So when we talk about, pocketing a certain character, healing them as necessary, this is a big buff to kind of swing the fight back in your direction. And then Law of Refuge is finally a very expensive TP ability at 42, but a really good one where obviously reduces the physical damage taken for 3 times for an ally, while also reducing the chance of being targeted. So all of these TP abilities are fantastic support abilities, and the lightning characters are individually strong enough that they really will feel the impact of these. That Charlotte and Esther and Cloud are all individually very strong on their own, that this really does amplify them to even stronger levels. Now we get into the Subjob of the Devout. This one's a little more hit or miss. Law of Mitigation is a decent enough ability that increases the AoE resistance and the slash resistance, but I think she has enough durability overall that it's not going to really change things, and the Cure ability is kind of redundant with what you can do on the Arithmetician sub, which to me is what you're always going to have equipped. So to me, the single target Cure, single target attack, and the AoE Cure, AoE Thundara, all of those abilities are far more impactful and have more versatility. So I don't see a case in which you would not have this on. So Arithmetician is definitely the thumbs up for the Subjob. We get into the Thief again. Nothing here speaks to her kit other than maybe Steal Time, the PvE content, but the rest of this really not applicable for anything that she does. So when we talk about the analysis, there's really not a whole lot to analyze. It's really just, does she support well? And the answer is yes. Now we get into the Limit Break. Absolutely fantastic Limit Break in that increases HP of up to 310 time modifier when you max it, while also being an attack and magic buff for them. So again, we talk about skewing the team fight and kind of swinging things back in your favor, while also, not the least of which is important, dispelling all debuffs for allies. Being able to cleanse those debuffs and kind of restart from scratch after your enemy has already used a lot of AP to apply those debuffs is a really great ability overall. So big thumbs up on this Limit Break. Now for the TMR, I'm not the biggest fan of this one. Number one, because when you talk about types that are cloths or armors, I expect the ability or the stats to be really good because there are so many other very strong cloths and armor. In this one, although the stats are fine, 364 is a little bit on the lower side, 6 defense, 12 spirits, fine. The ability itself, it's only one cast, which we are seeing more multicast TMRs recently, but this ability itself also doesn't mean that much to me, where it increases the all attack resistance of 10% to allies. The thing with this one is that there's so much penetration into the game that I don't think 10% actually means all of that much. In particular for slash types attacks, magic type attacks, to some degree missile as well for some characters that have missile penetration. The ones that you don't see a lot of penetration on are the strike and the pierce. It exists, you just don't see it that often. So sure, in a case where you're going against high pierce or high strike type enemies, this could have some use, but then again, that's also what her two biggest weaknesses are, so maybe not a good matchup to begin with. So overall, the TMR I think is fair, but not great. And her mastery ability, healing power of 10 for herself, like mentioned, really impactful, and the magic of 10% also helps elevate her total magic stat to that A grade I ended up giving her. Now for TP overview. Again, as we saw, there's a lot of expensive abilities. And the way TP works is you start out with it, and then you just slowly deplete it over time. It doesn't regenerate in the same way that AP does at all. Some things about how you can ramp up your TP. Mage's Habit, the cloth, gives a flat 30 TP. Soul of Thamasa, an accessory that you don't see as prevalently anymore, gives 40 TP as well. The Silver Rim Spectacles give a flat 20. The White Cape also gives 30. So these are some ones that you may not use as frequently, but definitely could have extra utility for Resnick that you may not have on your average support or magic caster. Now you also have the left side Truststone passive that you can roll on, which is TP 10%. It's not one that I've personally ever rolled on, but certainly it doesn't hurt to throw them on one of your Truststone sets randomly that you might throw on her. Certainly will help. The left side UR Truststone, the sub stats, so these are the ones that are temperable that you can re-roll. TP is one of the 3 stats on all of them, and quite frankly, when I re-roll my stats, I've never looked at TP because, again, not impactful for the majority of characters. So I usually try to max the other 2 stats, just to save how much gil I use. That being said, when you do max those TP substats, they can get up to 16 each. So 16 times 3 is a lot of extra TP on just any Truststone set. And then finally, there is a specific TP Truststone set. Definitely not recommended, though. There's so many other good ones on that left side. For set abilities, I wouldn't recommend crafting the TP set bonus to get the TP of 10%. I'd much rather just have the passive of 10%. I do think an underrated thing to play with is the Warrior of Light TMR. Not one that gets used ever, quite frankly, where the ability of this is a TP auto restoration of up to 10% when you max it. So if you are running out and want to throw this as a wrinkle into things, I could certainly see this being a valuable accessory. And again, you can still equip cloths, which is a great thing about this one, while still giving you some nice crit evade and a little extra accuracy, more so than your average piece of equipment might be. So this is a decent thing for her overall, not only ability-wise, but stat-wise. And then when we talk about espers, there's a ton of espers that give TP percentage buffs as well. Now, a lot of the UR ones tend to hover around that 7% TP buff, but as you get down to the lower rarities, MR and SR, you'll see like Winter Moogle, Float-Eye Cactar, all of them have nodes that give up to 15 to 20% TP. That might be a little bit overkill, and obviously you're giving some trade-offs going from a UR Esper to an MR or SR Esper, but there's other Espers that certainly can buff this as well. So when you put all of this together, there are some ways to mitigate it. It's not a terrible hurdle to overcome. It's just something you should at least be cognizant of. Now we get into the notable vision cards. Quite frankly, there's really not a whole ton. To me, the de facto best one is the Wish Upon a Demon, where great stats. To me, it's more about the party buffs here, where AoE resistance is fantastic for survivability. The magic attack does help her in the instances where she does attack. Obviously, if you have Ibarra, this will help both of them. Dexterity 35% certainly helps the critical hit rate of the other characters and some of the accuracy, which she does need. So this card does a lot of good things for her overall. I do think the Europa one is similar, maybe a step down, but I like it for the unit effects where you can get extra magic of 10% and some extra HP, while also getting the agility here as well, and the crit damage for your teammates. Really not something that Resnick is going to capitalize on. I also think in a kind of twist of things, I think Ramuh could be a good primary vision card. Most often, I see this used as a sub-vision card to help boost magic stats, but that magic of 50%, particularly if you're using multiple magic units like Resnick and Ibarra, certainly is impactful, while also having the upside of some mirror matchups where there's some lightning resistance on this, that if you are going lightning versus lightning, this is going to help her survive in that matchup. So that's really all I have to offer from this. Definitely preferable as a sub-vision card, but 50% as a main vision card certainly is impactful as well. And on that note, there is an MR one that I do like for similar reasons. The Envious Magician one gives you that 30% magic buff. I also like this though because it does have some decreases to the activation times, which when you compound that with some of the other abilities she has, although she doesn't have a ton of things with cast times, this certainly does help on the ones that she does. In addition to the Human Killer upon magic attack, which, she's not going to get a ton of upside from, but certainly every little bit helps. And the decreased defense of 5, not terribly impactful given that she does have enough defense in her kit that it's not going to make her terribly weak. That's really it for the vision cards. Now for the espers, I don't think there's any big twists here at who I think is best. I am a fan of Europa just for the agility that it has, of the 18 agility, while also giving the magic attack. I like the crit evasion as well for some survivability. Pierce resistance I also think is noteworthy on this, where she does start up so negatively that if you are trying to hedge against it, this is a great esper that can do so, while also increasing missile resistance as a potential and lightning and magic attack. So overall, a lot of good board things that you can play here, while also having really good stats overall for magic units. I do think if you're going for that hyper aim build, if you're going all or nothing, Ramu is also still the go-to for that because of the amount of accuracy that he has, in addition to the lightning attack and the magic attack here. But again, this is more niche to that certain kind of aim build. I also think another good one, and this is kind of for everyone, Bahamut is definitely one of the best magic espers, just for, again, talking from stats, a lot of agility, which I like about Europa. This does have the benefit of the magic percentage up, so although a lot of these other espers are magic attack and lightning attack, which she may not always use as part of her AI, this magic buff will impact her healing potential as well, so I particularly like Bahamut for that reason. And there's a slew of other espers that I'm sure are really good on her, but nothing that I think really stands out as a hidden gem. I think the last one maybe as a throw out there when we're talking about countering, I use that word relatively, the water meta. Tonberry is a slightly magic oriented esper, definitely a lot slower, but when you look at the board in particular, it does have that water resistance in addition to already having 5%, so you can further increase that water resistance. You can also further increase the slash resistance, which water is obviously very much known for at the moment, while also getting things like water killer as well. So I do like this esper for a handful of different reasons for her in certain circumstances. Now, notable weapons, when we talk about the rods, the two that immediately come to mind, number one is Prunus Lamina, where obviously this does have a good magic stat at 150 on the magic. I don't think the aim build is one that you're going to really necessarily need, even though she requires accuracy. I think if you're going that direction, you would rather have the Alexandrite ring or the Silver Rim of Spectacles, but that magic stat of 150, while also having the upside of the increased modifier here for lightning attacks, I think is really beneficial. I also think a really good one here, just from the sake of a magic stat, is the Magistral Rod, that this one gets up to 170, while also having the modifiers for magic attack and the evocation boost. Now this one is, I don't think all that impactful, but when you're looking at the different rods, I think this one probably has just slightly more value than some of the others. But other than that, you really can't go wrong with many of the others. Where Platinum Rod, 162 magic stat, kind of that same realm as the Magistral Rod. Cypress Pile, definitely a little more niche, but it is nice that it has the magic attack penetration, so she doesn't have any of that in her kit, so being able to have that extra 20 certainly could help her damage output while also giving the 166 magic, but again, not really known for damage, so kind of hit or miss on this one. But other than that, I don't think there's any other that you can really go wrong. The Rune Staff, a lot of people mention as a good one for her, but quite honestly, per my other presentation, I do just think a Truststone passive of 10 is far superior than equipping this one and getting 15. This magic stat is not nearly high enough to compensate for what you lose on the other staffs in terms of damage modifiers and whatnot. Now we get to Truststone recommendations. For the left side, a lot of people might go for the HP one, which does also give element resistance, but because we saw her base HP isn't the strongest in the world, I don't think she benefits a ton from the 5% HP. I would much rather go for the defense or the spirit ones, depending upon the matchup you're trying to see. Now, if you're going again against water, primarily, I think the defense one is the best to try to mitigate the damage that Astrius does, but this also gives healing power 10, which increases her healing power even further. And if you're trying to look for the passives to really go that are specific to her, not just the generally good ones like HP and luck, I do think that, as we mentioned, the TP of 10 is a good one. The water resistance certainly is for that same reason of countering that type of comp. The pierce resistance I do think is decent enough because the things you are equipping on her probably not going to give her equipment that has pierce resistance, so this is a nice interesting way to give her an extra 7% without having to go for like the elf cloak specifically to gear against it. And then magic debuff resistance I actually like a lot because you want to keep her magic stat up so she can keep the heals going, and in particular because Celeste does have a magic debuff as part of one of her spammable attacks that you want to have that 50% chance that it doesn't apply at all. So I do think specifically to Resnick and specifically to going against water, these are some of the ones that you're going to want to hunt for, looking for Resnick in particular. Now the right side of things, Couple different ones you can go with. The magic one, obviously, to help bolster that magic stat. The accuracy one, if you're really trying to hone in on getting her to be hyper accurate, don't have to, but it's certainly worth mentioning. And the agility one I like as well, for kind of the same reasons I talked about as Velis, that when you have a support that is just very, very speedy, it just allows for more healing, more potential that you're not falling behind the enemy in terms of damage done, so you just become a heal bot, if you know what I mean. I notice that sometimes with Halloween Leela as an arithmetician, that since she doesn't heal people up to full as frequently, what ends up happening is if you're taking too much damage, Leela just ends up just spamming Cura in this sort of like inevitable battle of attrition that you don't always win. So getting that extra agility in there to make sure that Resnick can both heal properly and get people up faster, but also have an opportunity to help chip in with some damage goes a long way. Now, for the passives on the right side, healing power of 10, definite, I like, and the decrease of skill activation time, really niche. Again, not one she's going to use quite often because she really only has one ability that offensively requires the cast time. But again, because it is her most impactful modifier, I do like the emphasis on making sure that it's as close to an instacast as possible, particularly when you think about how speedy some of the top end comps get at the moment, that their agility certainly can't be understated when it comes to how fast can you actually get your cast off. But that's the Resnick review in a nutshell. This is a good character for what she's supposed to bring to the table. I don't think she's gonna, alter anything terribly drastically, but I think there are parts of the ranked ladder that people that aren't min-maxing their water comps really well. I do think Resnick is a piece that will tip that in Lightning's favor to essentially beat out what Velis does to regenerate the health, and to make sure that Esther and Cloud and Charlotte can truly do the damage they need and not end up dying too quickly with how much Astraeus can put out. So overall, not a must pull, but if you are heavily invested in Lightning and you see opportunities where you're going against water comps and you're just barely losing or even just barely winning, I do think she's a piece that certainly increases the odds if that's where you are currently in your matchups. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll talk to y'all soon.